Hello.
We are so grateful to have you with us this morning. I'm Christy Paul. Good morning to you.
I'm Victor Blackwell. Thanks for being with us.
Tough night, for sure. There was pain.
The
There
rich
was
are
anger
reeling.
across America. It was a fourth night of protests. It was sparked by the death of George Floyd.
Dawned on me today that the mainstream media represents the interests of the rich people. I think that's why CNN's headquarters in Atlanta was tagged.
So right now, there's
CNN can pretend like they're on the protester side because they're amplifying their message, but they're not.
manslaughter as well. But protesters are demanding that the other officers.
This is a good thing. This guy got arrested.
Face charges.
He obviously changed his look because in the video of him with his knee on George Floyd, he had a buzz cut and a goatee. And now he's got longer hair and no goatee. I bet he's trying to lay low and look different so people didn't recognize him and hurt him. Now he's in jail. It's probably the safest place he could be.
What you're seeing on your screen now, this is Atlanta.
He got charged with third-degree murder and manslaughter. So they said that one is like 20-year jail sentence, one is a 15-year jail sentence for the maximum. And you normally, in America, you normally serve about half that with good behavior. So we're looking at probably 17 and a half years max, and then probation at the minimum. So he could have no jail time too. They could charge the other guys, but I bet they would charge them with something lesser.
Show you a little bit closer now. Just a warning, there is profanity all over that wall and the CNN sign. But
can you blame them?
The protesters have used that wall and the sign sort of a canvas for all their complaints against the police, against the president, against the Georgia governor, and a lot of.
I support protesters. Protest anything you want. Go right ahead.
There's broken glass at this building, and so this is just one example of a lot.
And you know, protesters have a lot of different reasons why they protest. There's usually not just one reason. And I suspect every one of these cities has had problems with police brutality. So all the people in these cities that came out to protest aren't just doing it for this George Floyd guy. They're doing it because their neighborhood, their city, has experienced police brutality, and they didn't like it. They hated it, and they're standing up against it today. So when you see these sorts of things in cities besides Minneapolis, I think that's what's going on. That dawned on me because I was abused by 2 Los Angeles Police Department officers in LA, and there were riots, protests in LA. And I know I'm not the only one. I mean, look at Rodney King. This lady's an idiot. CNN likes this lady because she's rich like they are, and she's yelling at the protesters. Rich people don't want people protesting. They want people working 9 to 5, paying their rent, head down, spending their money, falling in line. So that lady's very naive. And I'll be damned if someone's going to tell me what a dead person would do or say in a situation like this. Because they keep invoking what Martin Luther King would say or do and all these other people. And that's nonsense. People want to use dead people to their advantage and pretend like they know what they would do or say. And they don't. They have no clue what life would be like right now for these people or for any of us.
After officials say shots were fired at officers, but no officers were injured. Dozens of protesters were arrested Friday in New York City after a standoff between police and protesters outside the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. The New York Police Department said multiple officers were injured, though none of those injuries are life-threatening. In Washington, D.C., the White House was temporarily locked down.
I'm in Hawaii, and there's nobody protesting in Hawaii. I think Hawaii has the most passive people in the entire country living here. Asians are pretty laid back as it is, and Hawaiians have a reputation for being chill. chill people. And it's the truth, they are. It's an extraordinarily blue state. They're happy to to be Democrats or whatever and take the path of least resistance in Hawaii. So, and the cops, I've never had any trouble with the cops in Hawaii. They've always been respectful to me and looked out for me and been cool to me.
In downtown Dallas, thousands of protesters took to the streets. Objects and rocks were thrown at officers
and I've had cops that could have ticketed me or thrown me in jail in Oahu and Kauai and even Maui, and they didn't. They're not looking to throw people in jail. When I lived in Long Beach, California, those cops were looking to throw people in jail. I lived there in 2012, 2013, and 2014 before I moved to Hawaii. And you look at them the wrong way and they'll throw you in jail. It doesn't matter if you don't even have a house to live in, they'll throw you in jail. They'll throw you in jail for pushing a shopping cart around. They'll throw you in jail for sleeping somewhere in front of the library on the concrete.
Continued early this morning on the West Coast with several arrested in Seattle.
If you have a warrant in Long Beach and it's not a serious one, they won't even bother taking you in.
Natasha Chen for us there outside CNN headquarters. And let's point out that this is not about us. This is one of many scenes, and we have reporters across the country. You'll see them throughout the morning. That is the extent of the focus on that CNN.
People like Victor Blackwell sound conflicted. Looked like somebody in Minneapolis, some law enforcement agent fired a rubber bullet at a cameraman. I think they're MSNBC or CNN cameraman. It just pointed right at the camera and squeezing the trigger.
Yeah, Christy, as you see these dramatic images from across the country of these protesters, some of them...
I've never been to Minnesota. I've been to over half of the U.S. states, I think about 30 of them. But I haven't been to many of the real northern ones yet, like the Dakotas, Michigan, Minnesota, Vermont, Delaware.
Give you a sense of just what we're seeing as the sun rises. As you can see here, there are buildings that are completely destroyed. You see windows smashed out. We saw some looters here earlier nearby us.
When I was a kid in high school, I drove up to the Los Angeles riots. Me and some friends took off from school and checked it out. And there's buildings burning and people running with boxes and things that they're stealing. It was a pretty chaotic sight. I think it was on April 29th or April 30th. It was after the Rodney King incident.
Now, as this destruction continues, we're also hearing from elected officials doing their best to try to implore the public
I was a senior in high school.
to remain peaceful. Let's listen here to what the governor said and the mayor of Minneapolis pleading with members of the community for some semblance of peace. The situation is incredible.
CNN's Don Lemon.
What's the word for it?
An important conversation. I can't breathe. Black men living and dying.
You have people that protect the police officers and keep them away from being litigated against.
The White House as well. They clashed with police at times. The outcry over President Trump's response to these demonstrations.
So in some areas in the United States, it's very difficult to fire a police officer. It's becoming a little bit like that with teachers too.
About the other officers involved.
Yeah, so the other officers,
And especially after they get tenure.
this was you could get a sense that this is a holding charge, and what I mean by that is they needed to make an arrest, and they needed to do it swiftly. They've charged. They can go back and adjust those charges at any time.
I'm going to think of the word I'm trying to think of in a second.
The degree that they're charging, keep in mind that first degree, there would have to be facts that show that this officer, prior to engaging with George, had the intention of killing him and set about action to satisfy that intention. The second degree charge.
Union. That's the word, union. They have different police officer unions have different amounts of power in different cities and counties across the country. So they've lobbied in some places to make it very, very difficult to litigate against the cop. They're protected. I mean, cops should have some protection, and they put their life on the line, but it shouldn't be impossible to charge a cop of a crime. And the court will sort it out. The judge will sort it out. The jury will figure out the truth and and they'll decide. In this situation, they have it on video. When they abused me in Los Angeles, I don't think anybody had it on video. Although there were some witnesses that were working for the police department that were standing around. I applied to TMZ and asked them if they were watching, if they had seen it, because I know they've got a good network of ears and eyes, and I think I might have seen a helicopter when they detained me outside for about an hour. This was in 2012.
It's horrific to watch certainly what happened at the hands of these officers.
Because if there's no witnesses or if there's a police officer witnesses that lie, it's going to be your word against their word. But I think that police brutality, sadly, unfortunately, is a little bit like a DUI. They say before you get arrested for a DUI, you drive drunk many, many times. And that was true with me. And I'm not proud of it, and I stopped driving drunk after I got caught. I never did it again. But before I got caught, I did it several times. Maybe half a dozen times, I don't know. And so I think the same thing is true with police brutality like this. I think by the time you get caught, you've probably already done it several times. It's not usually your first time. Yeah, it really changed my life when I got my DUI. I changed my life in a lot of different ways. Stopped partying like I did with my fraternity in college. And I stopped driving drunk because I realized that if I were to hit somebody, that I would probably go to jail for the rest of my life. And when you're intoxicated, you can't really tell what you're doing. And you can't control yourself, and a motor vehicle is deadly. So don't ever drive drunk. It's very stupid. Just walk, get an Uber, get a taxi, get a sober driver, pass out. You got a lot of options. Ride a bike, bicycle.
Rochelle, we've heard many officials this week quoting Martin Luther King Jr. saying rioting is the language of the unheard, but then overnight we heard Minnesota Governor Tim Walz saying you're not getting back at the officer who tragically killed George Floyd by looting a town. Through what lens should we view what we've seen this week?
I love how people try to, pick out little snippets of what Martin Luther King said. He also said at the end of that he understood the riot. He also mentioned in a speech that he gave about with his Greek society, where he talked about the fact that he was actually fooled by young people, and he had to go home and think about why were they doing me when I'm trying to give them civil rights and I'm trying to fight for them. And he realized that it was because for so long they have told young black people the dream, this is going to happen. And that's why he asked the question, what do you do about a dream deferred? And he understood why they were bullying him. So, yes, Martin Luther King preached nonviolence, but he also understood the reason why people are violent. This is not just about police brutality of what you're seeing happen across the country. This is about hundreds of years of
And you got to define violence too. What is violence? You know what I mean? It's words. Some people say that the words are violent. Can words be violent? I mean, is violence breaking a window? Is violence banging a drum? Or is violence harming another human being?
We keep saying that these protests are in light of George Floyd. They're in light of Amy Cooper.
Some of these words are like buzzwords or dog whistles, and they're just used to incite people.
It goes back and back and back for many, many years. Rochelle, we'll have to leave it there. Appreciate your time.
And they're not well defined.
And MSNBC's Ali Velshi will be live on the ground in Minneapolis coming up at 8 a.m. Eastern.
But I think some people are getting really sick of the system. This capitalistic system that is skewed towards the rich and circling America around the toilet bowl with pollution and lies and materialism. I don't think that is inspiring to anybody. I think people have taken a long, hard look at life in America during this pandemic. And a lot of people, their job was deemed not essential. And I think that was a blow to a lot of people that consider their job as a defining aspect of their life and their character. I'm a writer, so I've still been writing. I'm working on 3 books right now. I can write anywhere, anytime. I'm working on a book called A Brand New World, The Addendum. It's a book of short stories. I might end that in September. I'm working on a book of haikus, 109 haikus in Kauai. I've written about a dozen. And I'm working on a general poetry book. I've written about 3 poems for that. I purposely haven't written too many poems in quarantine, just because I don't want to just complain about quarantine in every poem. Just bitch about the government or, whatever. Because it's bad, but that's not that bad. And it's a pain, and it's weird, and it's not fun, but it's not that horrible. And, it's probably a dumb thing for me to complain about on the end when when America's dishing out so much money to everybody, and some people in other countries have nothing. The poorest people in America are still richer than everybody, the 21st country and onward, basically, I think is what I found. The poorest people in the United States are still ranked about 20th in the world's top richest people. Put it that way. So in other words, if you're dirt poor in America, you still get so much through just food stamps, for instance, and just through unemployment insurance or free medical care or food banks or whatever. If you add up everything that you get in America for free, you're still richer than most of the people in the world. The thing is this government and the system relies on people that want more, that want a lot of stuff. They, if everybody was content with a little bit, everything would break down. But I think a lot of people don't want to be involved in a system that is just, like a dog chasing its tail, where you're working your ass off to flush your money down the toilet every month with a rental, where you can't buy a house, and you got to pollute to get to work. You got to pollute all night in your sleep. Got to pollute with your food at every restaurant you eat at. I don't think any of those things are inspiring, encouraging. I think they're all sad and horrible and pathetic. And the more people learn and know the truth, the more people are going to hate the way it is. And they're going to stop participating. We already see a whole lot of people not moving out of their parents' house. And that's part of the reason.
Are the headlines at this hour? The CDC releasing a new report that indicates the virus started spreading in the U.S. as early as late January. That, by the way, a full month before community spread was first reported. The study also saying the virus first came to the U.S. from China following several importations from Europe.
Overnight, the Supreme Court rejected a church's challenge to California's rule limiting attendance at religious services. South Bay United Pentecostal Church argued the limits violate religious freedom. Chief Justice Roberts, siding with the court's liberal justices, wrote these restrictions, which allow churches to reopen at 25% capacity, quote, appear consistent with the First Amendment.
And President Trump announcing the U.S. will cut ties with World Health Organization. The president criticizing the WHO for its response to the pandemic and says the U.S. funds will be redirected to other public health needs.
And nearly a week after these viral images showed a packed pool party in Lake of the Ozarks in Missouri, health officials there now confirm a person who attended several crowded bars has tested positive for coronavirus. Officials say the patient developed the illness Sunday but was possibly infectious at the time of their visit to the popular spot.
Which is why Missouri officials have been urging everyone there to go into quarantine for some 14 days. Now to the search for solutions in the COVID-19. They have the growing evidence that many cases are asymptomatic.
Joining us now is Dr. Katie Passaretti, the Medical Director of Infection Prevention at the Carolinas Medical Center. There's a new study that we'd like to break down. It suggests 80% of infections are asymptomatic, and this data comes from a cruise ship in mid-March, showing passengers develop symptoms while on board.
I just got 2 masks for my dad today because he wanted me to send them to him. He's in California. And California is in a strange situation. They're pretty caught between trying to open up and trying to stay closed as long as they need to. Hawaii is closed until June 30th.
It's hard to generalize this particular study to the general population. It was in a cruise ship, a very confined space, so we would anticipate
Hawaii's had very few cases.
But definitely concerning that they saw that.
I mean, I think there's been 640 cases about. I'm in Kauai. We've had 20 cases here, 0 deaths, and only 1 hospitalization, and no new cases in weeks.
Are asymptomatic.
But it relies on, the tourists. It relies on the airports being closed. There's a 14-day quarantine for anybody that flies to the island right now. And as soon as they lift that, then anything can happen. And so it's really the mainland and even some other countries that determine when Hawaii opens, I think. And Hawaii thinks that they get stuff here a week or 2 after the mainland, like viruses and things hit here a little later. And they're probably right.
Yeah, we are very definitely far away from herd immunity. Like you said, 60 to 80% of population would need to be infected to stop that chain of transmission. New York is worst case scenario by antibodies 19-20%. Many other areas of the country are seeing 2 to 5%. So I think it's unlikely that we're going to get herd immunity just by natural infection. It really is going to rely on that a good vaccine becoming available.
All right, Dr. Katie Pazzarelli, good to see you back. We liked your avatar. We prefer you better. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Tomorrow, MSNBC's Joy Reid looks at poverty in the age of coronavirus. Joy will speak with farmers, meat packers, minimum wage workers on how they're being impacted. Watch American Crisis, Poverty and the Pandemic tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern on MSNBC.
Now to our other big story, the leaders in Minnesota this morning are pleading for peace in the streets.
But after 4 straight nights of unrest, what will Minneapolis do to calm protesters?
It's good. I've read that Kauai opened up several houseless shelters near the beaches around the island. So that was a nice thing to do. I was reading that in New York, they've got rats that are forming armies and resorting to cannibalism. So they're saying that their houseless population might be at risk because those damn things might start biting them or trying to eat them. That would be horrible. That would be tragic. But this is a pretty amazing time to be in because both of these things are causing some big problems for the racism and the subsequent looting and protesting and the pandemic. It's really unfortunate that they're trying to rush the country open so fast because there's not a good testing system in place. And it's going to be spread around, and it's already spreading around. You know, it looks like it's getting close to 105,000 deaths. And it looks like by the end of June that there will be more deaths from COVID-19 in the U.S. than all the people that died in World War I. So that's pretty awful. It's just, I hope people aren't trusting these people that are in office because they all have an agenda. You might be able to trust your local governments, the mayors and the governors, to an extent, and even if you listen to them and trust them, they still could be wrong. You know, some well-meaning people, even with data, sometimes get it wrong. But the federal government seems to be just off their rocker on this. And I think Trump's finally getting the point that it's just in his best interest to shut up about it. He's said enough. I think for the longest time he tried to get these liberals to like him and to give them easy questions and to paint him in a positive light, and he finally just realized that's never ever going to happen. And so that's why he's going after Twitter, and that's why he's even going after Fox and trying to make Fox into what he wants it to be, and acting like he's thinking about opening up another media source or resorting to a different media outlet. Hello. The U.S. just isn't a Republican country. You know, Republicans are pretty antiquated. You have to go to a red state to appreciate, you know, Republicanism, and still it's only about half the state maybe is Republican anyway. And still, if you look at how many people are in the Republican Party in the country, it's still only around 60 million out of a country of 330 million. So, you know, it's a minority viewpoint, and I think it's only going to get stranger and get more antiquated with time because, you know, we're moving forward in time. People, I don't know.
News and the big news overnight from the Pentagon, at least the Pentagon taking the rare step of ordering the Army to put several active Army units on patrol and possibly for deployment to Minneapolis. They include some from Fort Drum as well as Fort Bragg in North Carolina. This after unrest in more than a dozen sites across the country.
And Candace, yesterday we saw CNN correspondent Omar Jimenez taken away under arrest. He and his producer and his photographer, they were just covering the protests in Minneapolis. They were under arrest, but the governor, Tim Walz, later apologized and made sure they were released. We want to show you now some video from Louisville, Kentucky. Police last night, overnight, firing pepper bullets at a TV news crew while the reporter was live on the air.
Gotta go, and that's fine with us.
I was in Louisville.
Are you okay?
Yeah, this is what I was talking about.
Katie, are you okay? Rubber bullets, it's okay. It's those pepper bullets. It's those pepper bullets that you're aiming that at. At us, like directly at us. Directly. Why are they doing that?
Shooting at our crew.
I don't know. Do they not know that obviously they see the camera? Right. They're telling us to move now, I guess farther away.
And obviously they see the microphone, the lights, they know she's a TV crew. In fact, she's from our NBC affiliate, Wave 3 News, there in Louisville, Kentucky. As you can see, she was okay after all that.
And you saw the officer on camera pointing right there, that rubber bullet gun right at the crew.
That's wild.
The family of George Floyd, meanwhile, responding to the charges filed against the
Maybe he was a
police officer
conservative.
in his death. Coming up, we will bring you
Way
the
back when I was
reaction
a
to
conservative, when I was about 22 years old, I visited Louisville, Kentucky, because I was thinking about going to graduate school there. There's a seminary called, I think it's called Southeastern Seminary or Southern Seminary. One of those is in Louisville. And so I visited the school. And it was fine. It was good. It was okay. It was an interesting city. It was a little older looking and conservative. I didn't know much about Louisville. And I don't think I had ever been to Kentucky. And I visited 5 seminary graduate schools across the country on a trip in my car. I drove from San Diego up to Clark Summit, Pennsylvania, and back. It was an amazing experience. And like I said, I was real conservative religious at the time, so I visited Bob Jones Seminary University in Greenville, South Carolina. I visited Baptist Bible College and Seminary in Clark Summit, Pennsylvania. I visited Liberty Baptist Theological Seminary in Lynchburg, Virginia. And I visited Southern Seminary in Fort Worth, Texas. And that might have been it. I had already visited Dallas Theological Seminary in Dallas, Texas. My pastor at the time, Dr. David Jeremiah, that's where he went. So when I was graduating college, I figured I would just go there. That's the best one in the country. And I think I flew there and visited it, and then I flew back. But it was a very high academic school, and for whatever reason, they didn't accept me there. So I visited all those other ones across the country, and came back. And I ended up just applying to Liberty. I liked it the best, and I was accepted there, and I ended up going there. Yeah, it was pretty exciting. I moved to Lynchburg, lived there for about a year or two. That's a whole other story. But I saw my first snow flurry when I was eating with the students at a restaurant in Fort Worth, Texas. All these schools, if you think about attending a grad school, they'll roll out the red carpet for you if you contact them in advance. They'll put you up in a hotel, give you a tour, give you a meal. Sometimes they waived the application fee. The Baptist Bible College and Seminary actually paid for my gasoline for one way. I saved all my receipts, and I think it was like $190. I was in a social fraternity in college called Kappa Alpha Order. We founded the Gamma Iota chapter in San Diego, and so I stayed at a few of my frat houses across the country.
News this morning, the family of George Floyd and their attorney, Ben Crump, calling for first-degree murder charges against fired Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin.
Chauvin was charged with third-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter in the death of George Floyd. Well, joining us right now for legal analysis of this is Katie Fang, who's the attorney and MSNBC legal contributor. Katie, thank you for being here. Okay, so talk about the differences between first-degree murder and third-degree murder. How much more difficult would it be to prove first-degree in this case?
Yeah, so the reason why we're looking at third-degree murder charges as of right now, Candace and Lindsay, is because of the issue of intent. You know, first-degree murder is the premeditation. It's the formation of intent in the mind of the defendant.
Right, that's why I was thinking maybe they didn't arrest this guy right away, because maybe they were surveilling him and listening to him, watching where he goes to see if they could find some intent or some premeditation.
What does that mean? That means increasing the charges if the evidence comes out later on that it's necessary to be able to charge something higher than the third-degree murder.
Oh, sure, they could definitely do that. If they find evidence, if they search his home or something, or somebody comes forward and says, yeah, he talked to me about this guy, he wanted to kill him, then they could totally file a first-degree murder charge against him at any time.
Procedurally, even though Officer Chauvin has now been arrested and charged with a crime, will he actually go to a jury trial anytime soon?
They said he actually knew the guy or worked with the guy at a bar or somewhere beforehand. So that'll be interesting to see what happens. This could easily take 6 to 9 months or longer, this case. And depending on whether he posts bail or not, he could just disappear, or something bad could happen to him too.
Eric, I want to ask you, tell me about the uniqueness of having a police officer at the center of this case. We know that police released body cam video. It was heavily redacted. What can you tell us about?
He'll probably be protected because he's, you know, they'll assume that some of the people in jail that he could be hanging around could be there because he put him in jail, and his life could be in danger.
I imagine that right now what they're doing is calling through each of the body cameras and any footage that they can get from members of the public.
Yeah, I'd like to see the body cameras.
Because they want to piece together every single aspect from every angle they can, coupled with what the audio statements are. Because there are audio statements that some of the one of the officers I think said at some point that he was concerned about him going into a rage.
Excited delirium.
From delirium, yes, thank you, I forgot the term. And that's going to be important to go to state of mind of these officers. Let me be clear. The conduct here is absolutely reprehensible and in some ways very indefensible. But the manner in which it's been charged, which I know has gotten a lot of criticism thus far, everybody is saying that it should be upcharged to murder 2 or murder 1. But quite frankly, based upon the evidence that's been revealed thus far, and there might be a lot more, but based on that evidence, not only would murder 1 or murder 2 not fit, but quite frankly, the murder 3 charge that they've leveled against him at this point also most likely won't be sustained and will be subject to a credible challenge by any worthy defense lawyer.
And there were some other issues with his the initial reports of his autopsy.
I disagree.
As a good defense attorney could go through very well.
It sounded like the third-degree murder charge was exactly what he did.
Floyd's last moments. What stands out to me is this part where the defendant, it says, had his knee on Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds in total. 2 minutes and 53 seconds of this was after Floyd was non-responsive. Katie, as you hear that, you see that sort of information right there. Talk about the amount of
And
evidence that
manslaughter.
presents in this particular case.
Well, it ends up being very compelling, Candace, because you see that we actually have objective.
They might only get him on one of
evidence
those.
in terms of the amount of time.
Maybe just the
that Officer
manslaughter,
Chauvin
depending.
was on Mr. Floyd's body. But please keep in mind too, there are at least
Sure, it'll
three
be a
other
big
officers
circus
who
when they
are
have the
on
trial.
Mr. Floyd's body as well. They have not been charged, and so that autopsy report that you just mentioned and that we just read in conjunction with the complaint in this case against Officer Chauvin, it should be taken into consideration that despite the size and maybe some pre-existing health conditions for Mr. Floyd, having 4 grown men on your body for more than even a few minutes is evidence that there was something criminally going on at the time of this incident, and that is why, with respect, I do think that at a minimum, the third-degree murder charge, which carries up to 25 years in imprisonment, would actually survive any type of charge that's brought against it in terms of the elements of the crime.
Eric, yesterday, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo was on with Brian Williams in the afternoon, and he said,
Okay, and then yeah, third degree is 25 years. Manslaughter might have been 10.
He said more evidence needs to be
Thought it
released
added
to the
up to
public because the
35.
silence is deafening. How do you balance the need to preserve evidence, to make a strong case, with the public's right to transparency?
Well, that's a very challenging dynamic in a case like this, which is so emotionally charged, rightfully so. The more the public learns and believes that it can trust the Justice Department or the law enforcement agencies to be transparent with the evidence, the better it will ultimately be for the relationship between law enforcement and the community. If the community
This could open itself up to a lot more lawsuits too against this guy. You know, when they start digging around his life, his apartment, his social media, his wallets, whatever, they could find all kinds of other crimes that he's committed.
The Floyd case is raising new questions about what type of force police can use to apprehend someone.
And specifically, was the hold used against Floyd ever acceptable?
Apparently no. That's what I've heard. That they don't train them to do that. That's not the way to do it there. But I heard that in New York that a chokehold is allowed. Somebody came on earlier yesterday and was saying that de Blasio reinstated a chokehold being legal or something. I haven't fact checked that, but interesting. They're saying that these people, the mayors, are really in a lose-lose situation. And I could see that, you know, because on one hand, if they arrest the guy, then some police officers are going to dislike him. And who knows what that could lead to, you know. And on the other hand, if he doesn't arrest him, then the black people, rioters, protesters, all kinds of other people are going to hate him and probably not want to vote for him. So it's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Ultimately, though, it's not his decision, you know, the mayor's decision.